Welcome to Weather Questions, where we answer the questions on your radar.
Well, welcome back into another week of Weather Questions. We're here answering the meteorology questions on your radar. That we is myself, meteorologist Jan Kaj, as well as meteorologist Kaj O'Mara. We love coming to you guys every week to answer just whatever weather curiosities are on your mind. Kaj, how has your week been? Have you been pretty busy?
We've been extremely busy in our household. We just wrapped up our soccer season here this week, but more importantly, finally made it out to the orchard at one point and got some delicious season-ending apples in the area. So our fridge still has those in there, and it's one of my favorite parts about fall, now that we've finally gotten cold enough to actually call it fall in the Midwest. It's been so warm for so long, and this week it finally got crispy and cool. So I'm all about it, Jan. How about you?
What are your favorite things to do with apples once you get them?
You know, I just like to eat them straight. I will, just to try and get a little more mileage out of it, I'll usually slice them up and dip them in peanut butter or something. I used to be real big on caramel dip, and then I went away from that. And now it's just either apples straight or apples with some peanut butter, and I'm in great shape. Love that.
Sounds
Perfect.
Delightful. We're a big applesauce family, so we always have a big applesauce making day.
There you go. Yeah, I mean, homemade applesauce compared to the store-bought stuff, you can't even hold a candle to it. Can't even.
Nope. So good. Yeah. So good.
Yeah.
Well, I've also been pretty busy. We had a big conference that we put on for work here recently. And I was able to talk to some of the conference goers there about our podcast, and they were really enjoying it and recommending it to people. And it sounds like we've got, we were just kind of checking. We got some downloads from really all across the world as we're looking at, around Europe, Germany, and Denmark, and down into Asia and stuff. So thank you everyone for listening, for recommending the podcast. We really, really do appreciate it, and we couldn't do without you. But as always, remember, submit your questions, weatheredquestions@gmail.com to join the conversation. And we'll start off with one of those questions right now, Kaj.
Yeah, we sure will. Now that things are finally starting to get chilly around the upper Midwest, especially, which is generally the focus of our program, but we'll expand as far out as we need to. You're starting to see more light blues and purples and dark blues showing up on weather maps, maybe from your local meteorologist. So the question submitted, Jan, is simply, what is the difference between a frost advisory and a freeze warning? What's up with that?
Yeah, so that frost advisory, firstly, one of the questions that we do kind of get is, why aren't these always issued? These are issued usually in the fall and in the spring, so kind of on the ends of the growing season. And usually once you hit those marks that we're going to get to, then they stop issuing them, because otherwise you just have frost advisories or freeze warnings all winter long. But what the difference is that frost advisory is going to be indicative of frost temperatures. Freeze warning is going to be more indicative of freezing temperatures, so a little bit cooler. So frost is generally going to be kind of into those middle 30s. It does depend a little bit on where you are in the country. Generally for us across the Midwest, it's going to be more so in that kind of 35 to 37 or 38 degree range. Further to the south, maybe that would come up just a touch. But I mean, frost is frost. Water only freezes at one temperature, so it's not going to change too drastically. Then that freeze warning is going to come down a little bit. So anytime you're expected to hit that freezing point, generally, again, just a touch above, as we noted, that frost advisory is going to be down to about 35. So could be in that 33 or 34 degree range, all the way down to 32, where water actually freezes, and into that 31 or even 30 degree range. So that freeze warning, to sum all that up, probably about 30 to 34. You can also get something, a hard freeze. There's not necessarily a separate warning for it, but it means that you're going to get down into that 27, 28, 29 degree range. And that basically means this is the end of the growing season. So as I kind of noted, those warnings aren't issued throughout the entire winter. And that's because once you hit that hard freeze, once you hit that temperature, that anything that is growing in the ground is not expected to survive anymore, or at least, come back easily, then they stop issuing those throughout the season. And then they will start issuing again in the spring once we start kind of thawing and warming up. So that's kind of the difference between those. They can get a little bit confusing. regardless, we're starting to see more and more of those on our weather maps here as things are cooling down and we're headed further and further into fall here, Kai.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely correct. And great job on those definitions. Those are spot on. And I can tell, though, that there's going to be some folks listening that are raising their eyebrows or they're talking to their kids in the car on the way to school going, wait a second. We learned that water freezes at 32. Jan just said frost advisory type of weather might be 35, 36, 37 degrees.
Yeah.
So let's do a follow-up on that, Jan. So if it's 35, 36, 37 that your local broadcaster is saying is our current temperature, and you look out the back window and that little valley in your backyard has some patchy frost in it, what the heck happened? Why?
So what happens there is, and you might hear meteorologists talking about it, those lower lying areas, right? You'll hear them talking about that. So you'll get cooler pockets of air just kind of settling in those valleys that will not maybe have the movement of air as much. So things that are able to cool down easier because wind actually is something, it's turbulent and it helps things move around. And so when you have those areas that are kind of more undisturbed, that can make things a little bit easier to cool down. Maybe the moisture kind of pools in those areas too, that can also lead to differences in where frost or is able to form or where temperatures are able to get cooler as well. So generally, when we're giving a temperature on a weather map, say, and we say it's going to be down to 34 tonight, that's a kind of blanket statement across the area, but that doesn't mean every single individual is going to be exactly 34. There's going to be a couple that are going to be down to 36. There's going to be a couple that are down to that 32 degree mark. And that's why we, have those warnings and those advisories issued. Even if it doesn't quite get down to that freezing point exactly in your location, chances are someone around you made it to that point.
Yeah. Well, it also depends too. If you were to look it up on the official climate data websites, if you go to NCEI, for example, which is the National Centers for Environmental Information, all those official observations are at 2 meters high. It's about 6.5 feet off the ground. And part of me has been wanting to, Jan, forever, get a 2 meter long stick or pole and literally buy 6 thermometers, wireless ones, and put one like 1 inch off the ground, another 1 foot, 2 foot, 3 foot. And on a still night, I'd be willing to bet there's probably a 5-degree difference from top to bottom. And so that's another thing about cool weather is it's going to settle down low. And that's also where fog forms too. But that's for a different question for sure. But we're to that time of year. I have a friend who can't stand the phrase, bring your sensitive vegetation inside. We might be a mutual friend of ours. So at that point, you just kind of like, I usually let the garden go now, but we just did bring in some great tomatoes here this week. I mean, they're still producing. If we had such a great fall season. I was just looking
at my garden today and I was like, I need to go pick tomatoes again. They just keep coming.
Yeah. Well, we had that rainy weather there for a bit and it was still really warm, on pace to be one of the warmest Octobers on record for portions of Iowa and portions of the Midwest. So very interesting for sure. No question about it.
Absolutely. All right. Well, hopefully that answered that question. If not, you can always write in, again, weatheredquestions@gmail.com and join the conversation, either add to that question or maybe it sparked a new one. Here's another one, though, that we have in the can. Kai, why do some plains produce contrails, but others don't?
That is a fantastic question. And on this program, we talk all about learning things simplistically, and we're not going to go through and do a bunch of math, derivations, and things like that. What this has to do is not just with temperature, but also has to do with something called water vapor pressure too. So here's the deal with airplanes. Those are huge, massive jet engines, right? Mm-hmm. And they go from the ground level. And on a hot summer day let's just say you're taking off from Chicago. You take off from Chicago, it might be 95 degrees, really hot summer, July afternoon. By the time you get up to the freezing level at 36 or the cruising level at 36,000 feet, you might be at 40 degrees below zero Celsius, not Fahrenheit, but Celsius, maybe even colder. So at that point, obviously, the environment of the airplane is changing drastically. And so the exhaust that's given off on the ground on a warm day, much like your own vehicle, unless it's burning oil or something terrible, generally can be absorbed by the atmosphere without any sort of visual clue. But once you get towards those colder altitudes, it's going to be an instant condensation process. And it actually goes straight from the byproduct of the combustion all the way into ice crystals. And that's why sometimes it hangs up there. Sometimes it goes away immediately. And sometimes it doesn't form at all. It depends how humid that environment is up there. Mm-hmm. And so the big take-home message here is just immerse yourself in this analogy for just 1 second to make yourself understand this concept. And we'll do it twice, not just with us in a vehicle, but also us, way back in the day walking to the bus stop. So let's just say, even though we're not paying Starbucks anything and Starbucks isn't paying us anything, we're going to talk about Starbucks today. And let's say we are in our minivan and the kids are clamoring. They want Starbucks for whatever stupid reason. They want some kind of frozen drink. They want something fun. So you get into the Starbucks line on a July afternoon. And the way it always is it's wrapped all the way around the building. So you're going to be sitting there for a while and you fight back and forth in the car as to what you want for your order. And you finally get up there and you don't know what you want. But the entire way around the building, all you saw was a sunny day and cars that were in front of you. You never saw their exhaust. Fast forward to a December morning. Let's say it's a cold December morning. Let's say it's 0 degrees Fahrenheit. Well, that's a considerable difference now. You still have the same line at Starbucks. You still have the same family in the same van still trying to figure out what they're going to order by the time they get to the speaker. But the key difference is, even if you have those exact same vehicles occupied by the exact same people, you're going to look in front, you're going to go, oh man, that car is giving off a lot of pollution. And that car in front of it's giving off a lot of pollution. Well, the cars just don't do that in winter. They also do that in summer. But in the wintertime, we can visualize that. We can see that. And it's because the byproduct of the engine, the combustion byproduct, essentially goes into water vapor. And it doesn't quite go to ice crystals because it's not that cold down near the ground. But when you're in the aviation arena, minus 40, minus 50, minus 60 sometimes, that's just going to go straight to ice crystals. And if the air is very dry, it'll actually just disappear. It'll completely go away. It'll evaporate before it even has a chance to make a trail. If the humidity is high enough, it will make a trail until it finally dissipates or evaporates. So I think that's a great analogy for that. And you can see it every single day. You see all the car exhaust, all the tailpipes on a cold winter's morning, but you don't see that in July. And now let's take it down to a personal level. You're walking to the bus stop on a September morning where it might be 65 degrees. And then on a crispy, cool October morning where we have a freeze. You can see your breath now. Same body, same breath, right? But the physics of our atmosphere is drastically different now. It's sharply colder, which means by physical rule, it cannot hold as much moisture, whether that's in the form of ice or whether that's in the form of water vapor. So essentially, Jan, that's the science. And when it comes down to it, why do some produce, but why others don't? Well, good luck trying to guess the height of some of these planes. It might be a cruising altitude. Maybe there's one that's coming across at cruising altitude, and then there's another one that's coming across maybe at just 20,000 feet. Well, maybe at 20,000 feet, we're just cool enough to generate a small one. But at 36,000, we're so dry, you can't see it. And so as a result, now it looks like you have two different planes with two different exhaust trails. It's 100% having to do with the outdoor environment where those planes are. So It's a great question. It's a great question. And, people do talk about that stuff and they see that stuff in our environment. But that's the science behind it, Jan, as we go forward. Yeah. So next time you see one, educate one of your friends. That's the reason why.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's all about those cold temperatures and a little bit of everything else mixed in, just like everything with weather. There's so many different parameters at play. Mm-hmm. That's why it's so hard to have every little thing lined up, and one little change in everything can cause all the difference.
Oh yeah. Well, and then you start changing pressures and you start changing densities, and now you start doing a whole bunch of things happening. So it's really kind of an interesting situation when we come down to the complexity of the atmosphere, especially as you go higher up. But let's move on here to our trivia question, because we're largely talking about contrails and we talked a little bit about frost and freeze. At one point, I think in our tenure here of Weathered Questions, we talked about rainbows at one point. I forget when we did.
Early on. Yeah.
Very early on. But it's a true or false here today. So for folks listening, we're going to read the trivia question for you. It's going to be a true or false. And then we're going to take a small break and you'll have a chance to think about it. And it's going to be a 50-50 shot when we come back. So here is your trivia question here for today. Only water droplets scatter sunlight. Only water droplets scatter sunlight. Be thinking about that. It's a true or false, and we will have that answer for you when we return. Are you in need of a good family photo? Or perhaps you have a son or daughter getting married and you just can't find that diamond in the rough when it comes to getting that perfect photographer? Look no further than Iowa's photographer. Great rates, timely turnaround, and awesome performance. Iowa's photographer will help you coordinate every step of your big family day. Capturing the beauty of Iowa one photo at a time, head to iowasphotographer.com.
Today's trivia question.
Welcome back. And as we start to head back into our trivia question here, we'll give you one quick reminder. It's true or false today. And the question is, only water droplets scatter sunlight. That's true or false? Hopefully you had some time to think about it with only two options. Can't go too crazy. The answer is false. Well, you might think, well, what else is there? Well, water can be, as we just talked about, very cold at high levels. It can be frozen. And so ice can also scatter those water droplets. And that's going to make things look a little different in the sky. Kai alluded to that rainbow conversation that we had. Well, we kind of have a follow-up question here that relates directly to this.
Yeah, there's another type of atmospheric phenomena out there amongst a whole different laundry list, really. But we're just going to touch on one here. And this question was submitted. How do sundogs form? Jan?
So, we talked a lot about rainbows. Again, this was a while. I want to say it was like 1-1. I think
you're right. One of the first few that we ever did together. Yeah.
So if you travel back with me in time a little bit, we'll do a quick recap on how the sunlight hits for a rainbow. Sunlight will hit a droplet of water. It will bend it in a couple different ways, and it scatters out that light, sunlight, which is white light, and thus comprised of every single color of the light spectrum. Then it scatters it out and it creates that rainbow that we can see. What's happening with a sundog is very similar, except it's happening in a much colder atmosphere, or at least where ice crystals are present. So a lot of times we see them in the winter, but we've seen them even around here recently in Iowa in October. So again, the atmosphere is getting colder and there are ice crystals suspended aloft. And essentially what's happening is those ice crystals are scattering out that sunlight in a similar fashion to what would be happening with a rainbow. What we tend to get, though, is kind of rings around the sun, or almost half semicircles around the sun, just because of, again, how that light is refracted, and where those ice crystals are in comparison to the sun and us. So basically, the sun, let's say, is directly ahead of us, and then those ice crystals in the atmosphere are between us and the sun, and then we are looking at it. So it's specific order. Again, just like with the rainbow, you have to have the water droplets and the observer and the sunlight in a specific order to have everything actually happen and be visible to you. But that's essentially what's happening with that sundog. And there's a couple other things that, if you have ample ice crystals, that you can get some different little optics that will show up, or almost like a backwards bend sometimes, or a full sun halo, a full circle. So there's a couple different things, but generally those sundogs are going to be the most popular just because of that orientation of everything, of the ice crystals versus you versus the sun.
Yeah, great answer, Jan. And then one little bonus thing for your next trivia night. So folklore has it, and I have not found any way to 100% confirm it, nor 100% deny it, but it does make sense that sundogs got their name because of their loyalty to the sun. meaning they will follow the sun from lower in the horizon and up as long as those factors you described are still present, much like dogs are loyal to their masters. So that's how sundogs came into play with that name that we're very common mainstream now to talk about sundogs. Sun halos are rare if you see the full halo. Definitely take a picture if you see it. And chances are good, it's darn cold if you've got a full halo in the sky. So that's good stuff. I like it. It's good stuff.
Yeah, they are. They're really cool to see, really fun to see. And
yeah.
All right, let's wrap this episode up, Kai. We're going to talk a little bit about a question that we are asked quite a bit. So our discussion topic for today is very basically summed up as, how good are meteorologists really? The age-old joke, right? I love to be paid to be wrong half the time. Is that true?
I've heard that a lot. And, I think when you talk about it, when meteorologists are way, way off, nobody knows that more than them, than whoever issued it. But at the same time,
no one's getting more mad at themselves.
Exactly. At the same time, you're almost a victim of your own success and how much you really want to box yourself in, because we're going to share some stats here momentarily. But one thing I tried to coach to people when I did broadcasting is don't pin yourself in so tight, because the more you pin yourself in on specifics, the higher your risk is that you're going to be inaccurate. And the deal is this: if you forecast rain in the afternoon and a high in the mid 70s, and it hits 76 and it rains at 3:17 p.m., guess who's right? You're right. If you forecast a high of 74 and rain will probably hold off till after 4 p.m., guess who's wrong? You're wrong. And it's because you pinned yourself in too tight. Now, granted, you don't want to say, well, the sun's going to come up today. Have a great day. See ya. That doesn't really help anybody.
You'd probably be right, though.
You'd probably be right. You'd probably be right. But I think with the advent of technology, it has allowed us sometimes some confidence that we just don't have in this industry. And sometimes we stick our necks out there a little bit long to just kind of go, hey, look how smart we are. We're going to get this one right. And then you know what nature does? Nature says, not so fast, and decides to change it up. But those two forecast examples I gave you are essentially the same forecasts, the same weather environment, but one is distinctly wrong and the other one is distinctly right by all accounts. And so I think it's just how much you pin yourself in. But here's a great example. We'll just talk about the daily high temperatures. And this verification is tracked by the National Weather Service and the Weather Prediction Center. 2024 was the best year on record. And of course, we're in 2025, so they haven't had a chance to verify it yet. But your average forecast 3 days in advance had an absolute error of less than 3 degrees, which means, we sit here on a Wednesday, that 3-day forecast is Saturday. And all of a sudden, if there's a 75 on the board for Saturday, we can feel confident that 72 to 78 is going to happen. To put it in perspective, a 5-day forecast in 2024 last year had an absolute error of 3.5 degrees. All we have to do is go back to, and this is kind of spooky, Jan. All you got to do is go back to 2012 or even 2015, where a day 3 forecast was that accurate.
Yeah.
So it's amazing how much things have improved over the years.
It really is. It's wild to look at those statistics and really, digest those numbers. But, as the meteorology community, we are getting better. The science is improving. At the same time, to your point, Kai, if you don't have a human aspect to that meteorology that you're receiving, if you're only looking at a weather app that has a number, that's when you're getting that, 4 p.m., 100% chance of rain type forecast, because there has to be a number with it. It's not, even if there was an app out there that was giving long descriptions of things and saying, everything that a meteorologist would be saying in their forecast and explaining why that chance is maybe a little bit lower and that chance will pick up throughout the evening. people still want a pinpoint number at 4, at 5, at 6, and know exactly what that number is. So it's also just kind of a societal problem, I would say, of just what the people want and what we are able to give them in terms of modeling, even though that's not maybe always 100%. It's not the most precise. It's not the most accurate because of that. But the general idea of it is absolutely very accurate. And the fact that we can at all predict the future, especially to this degree, is incredible.
Yeah, with some type of skill. And of course, precipitation inherently makes things a little bit muddier. But I do want to give a quick shout out to the National Hurricane Center before we totally wrap this episode, because 2024 is their most accurate year on record. And just to put it in perspective, a 3-day forecast from the National Hurricane Center where the center of a storm would pass was within 100 miles. That is Iowa City to Des Moines. So imagine something spiraling in the ocean 3 days away from you. And on average, they're going to get it within 100 miles. And I think it was Hurricane Laura. I'm pretty darn sure it was Hurricane Laura in the early 2020s that I believe they missed their day 5 forecast by 6 miles. 6.
Wild.
So what does that do? That gives the EMs in the area ample amounts of time to say, here's what we got. And, you get your loss of life reduced when you've got such a long runway like that. So,
absolutely.
No, I mean, we're still going to have, bombed forecasts every now and again, but just kind of put it in perspective. And I think some of this, to your point, falls a little bit on the forecaster too. Don't pin yourself in too tight. And then on the public side, all right, just because the app says 3:45 might be 2 hours later.
Yeah.
I mean, nature's going to do what nature's going to do.
Generalization.
Right. Exactly. Well, hey, you have now killed 27 more minutes of your life listening to us here on Weathered Questions. We encourage you to submit your questions. We certainly want to know what's on your radar. You can email us your questions to weatheredquestions@gmail.com to join in on the conversation. Until next time, stay safe.